I used to think success was something you could just see, like a marker on a map or a goalpost you could reach. If I worked hard enough, made the right moves, I could finally break through. But the older I got, the more I realized it's never that simple. You can have everything and still feel like you're miles away from the finish line. I had big dreams, bigger than most, I thought. I wanted more money, more respect, more status. I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't just another guy drifting through life. But I felt stuck, invisible almost. I kept working, grinding, trying to make something of myself, but it felt like I wasn't getting any closer. The kind of guy who always feels like he's behind everyone else, like everyone else is making moves, but I'm just trying to keep up. Then there was Emily. She was everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Smart, funny, kind. She had this quiet confidence that made me feel like everything would be okay. But sometimes when we were together, I couldn't shake this nagging feeling that I wasn't enough. Like no matter how hard I worked, I wasn't where I needed to be. I started questioning everything. Was I really going to get where I wanted to go if I kept staying in this relationship? Maybe Emily was holding me back. Not intentionally, but maybe just by being content with where she was. Maybe I needed to be alone, to focus on myself, to fix everything I thought was wrong with me before I could be with someone like her. I'd see people around me, other men, more successful men, and it would hit me. They were already living the life I wanted. They had the job, the money, the status, and there I was, stuck in the same place, feeling like I was running in circles. I couldn't keep doing this, I thought. Maybe it wasn't her. Maybe it was me. Maybe I had to break away to find the version of myself I thought I was capable of being. But the truth was, I wasn't sure. I didn't know if this was the right thing to do or if I was just running from my own fear of failure. So I began to think that maybe, just maybe, it was time to make a change, to break free, to find myself. I've always had this nagging fear inside me, the kind you don't really talk about, because if you say it out loud, it sounds silly, but it's there, lurking. That fear of not being enough, of failing, of not measuring up to what I thought I should be. It's easy to look at someone else and see their success and think, why can't I have that? But when you look at yourself, it's a different story. I used to think I was just being hard on myself, that if I just kept pushing, I'd make it. But no matter how much I worked, how many late nights I put in, it never felt like I was making real progress. There was always something else I had to prove, something that kept me feeling like I wasn't quite where I should be. When Emily and I first started dating, I thought I'd found the answer. She was so sure of herself, so grounded. I admired that about her, but at the same time, it felt like she was the one thing I couldn't control. I wanted to be the man who could give her everything, but I felt like I couldn't even get my own life together. So, I started doubting myself. The more time I spent with her, the more I wondered if I was actually capable of being who I wanted to be. I told myself I needed to focus on my career, on my dreams, but I kept coming back to the same thing. I wasn't moving fast enough. It wasn't just the money or the success that I was after. It was the feeling of finally being enough, of looking at myself in the mirror and not feeling like I was falling short. I didn't want to be the guy who couldn't provide, the guy who wasn't ambitious enough. I didn't want to look back and regret not taking the chances I had when I was young. But at the same time, I couldn't shake this feeling that I was losing something important. Was I so focused on proving myself that I was missing out on something else, something real? Emily, though, she was happy. and I couldn't help but wonder if she was so happy with her own life. Did she even need me? I was so consumed by my own insecurities, I couldn't see that maybe, just maybe, I was pushing her away because of my own fears. When I met Emily, it felt like everything clicked into place. At least that's how I remember it. She was kind, easygoing, and seemed to see the best in people, even when they couldn't see it in themselves. She wasn't the type to rush into things or put on a show. She just was. And that was something I admired about her. Even though I didn't fully realize it at the time, I was so busy chasing after this perfect life I'd created in my head that I almost overlooked what was right in front of me. We went on long walks, spent hours talking about everything and nothing, and shared a connection I hadn't felt in a long time. It was simple, and I liked it. But there was always this voice in the back of my head telling me I needed more. I couldn't quite put it into words, but it was this constant sense that if I didn't get ahead, if I didn't find a way to prove myself, then maybe I wasn't good enough for her. I wanted to show her I could be the man who could give her everything. I wanted to be the guy who could take care of her, make her proud. But there were always moments when I felt like I was just falling short. I'd look at her, and she'd be so comfortable in her own skin, and I couldn't help but feel like I was still figuring myself out, still trying to catch up. She never pressured me. She never told me I needed to be better or work harder, but I could see it in the way she lived her life, calm, content. She had her own sense of purpose, her own passions, and it was clear she was going somewhere, even if I wasn't entirely sure where that was. I admired her for that, but deep down, I started to question, was she really what I needed right now? Or was I just using our relationship as an excuse to avoid facing my own fears? I was afraid of falling behind, of not being enough, not just for her, but for myself. I should have been able to see it then, that Emily wasn't holding me back. She was just living her life. And yet I couldn't help but feel like I needed to let go, that I had to chase after something bigger, something that would finally make me feel worthy. As time went on, those feelings I had about not being enough started to fester. It wasn't Emily's fault, but I began to take my frustration out on her. It was like a slow burn, small things at first. She'd ask me how my day went, and I'd brush it off, feeling irritated, even though she was just trying to show she cared. Or we'd talk about the future, and I'd get defensive, wondering if she was happy with where we were, or if she secretly thought I wasn't moving fast enough. At the same time, I was pushing myself harder at work, thinking that if I just worked a little longer, a little harder, everything would fall into place. But it wasn't making me feel better. If anything, it was making me more frustrated, more withdrawn. The more I tried to focus on my career, the more distant I felt from her. And the worst part, I didn't even know how to talk about it. It felt like I was turning into someone I didn't recognize, someone who was blaming everyone else for my own dissatisfaction. I started questioning whether Emily was part of the problem. Was she the reason I wasn't getting ahead? I knew that wasn't true on some level, but there was this nagging feeling that being in a relationship was a distraction, that I wasn't able to focus fully on my career goals because I had to split my attention. The jealousy would creep in when I saw other people succeeding, and I'd think, why can't that be me? There was a part of me that resented her for being okay with where she was, for not seeming to feel the same pressure I did. It wasn't that I didn't admire her for it, I did. But there was this part of me that thought, maybe if I had what she had, her sense of calm, her stability, I'd feel better. I'd have the clarity I was looking for. I'd never tell her any of this though. I didn't want to hurt her, didn't want her to think I wasn't happy. But inside, I started to wonder if our paths were meant to be separate, if we were really moving in the same direction. I felt like I was running in place, and maybe, just maybe, she was holding me back. I reached a point where I couldn't ignore the doubts anymore. I was so focused on my own fears, my own insecurities, that I convinced myself breaking up with Emily was the only way to move forward. I told myself that being in a relationship was holding me back from achieving everything I wanted. The more I thought about it, the more certain I became that I needed to focus on myself, on my career, on my success, and that meant stepping away from everything else. I remember the night I finally made the decision. We were sitting on the couch, watching some random show we always watched together, but I couldn't focus. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I was restless. She noticed, of course. She always did. Emily had this way of knowing when something was bothering me. I was trying to avoid her gaze, trying to keep it together, but my mind was already made up. Maybe it's for the best, I told myself. Maybe she deserves someone who can give her the future she wants, someone who isn't so hung up on his own insecurities. And so I said it. I told her that I thought it was time for us to take a break, that I needed to focus on myself. I could see the confusion and hurt in her eyes, but I pushed forward anyway. It felt like the right thing to do, even though every part of me was screaming that it wasn't. I think I need to figure things out on my own, Em. I don't want to hold you back, I said, my voice shaking, even though I didn't want it to. She just stared at me for a moment, and then she nodded. If that's what you think is best, she said quietly. I don't know why, but hearing those words made my stomach drop. It wasn't the relief I expected. In fact, it made everything feel heavier. But in my mind, I kept telling myself it was for the best. She deserved someone who could be the man she needed, and I needed to be alone to figure out who I really was. After we broke up, it felt like the world had shifted under my feet. At first, I convinced myself it was the right decision. I threw myself into my work, working longer hours, taking on more projects, trying to fill the void I had created by ending things with Emily. But something was missing. I expected to feel freer, more focused, but instead, I felt empty, like I had cut out a piece of myself, and no matter how many new goals I set or how hard I worked, that hole wouldn't fill. I kept myself busy, telling myself I was doing the right thing. I'd spend my evenings running through scenarios in my head, trying to convince myself I wasn't running away from something deeper. I thought maybe this time away from her would help me find the clarity I needed. But all I found was a constant sense of longing. The hardest part was the silence. I wasn't used to it. Emily was always there, her laughter, her support, her understanding. She was the person I'd go to when things were tough. Without her, I felt like I was just drifting, like I was missing a connection that had been my anchor for so long. I remember one evening, weeks after the breakup, sitting alone in my apartment, scrolling through old pictures of us. I hadn't wanted to look at them at first, thought it would hurt too much, but something in me needed to. I saw her smile in every picture, and I remembered how much she'd encouraged me, how she never judged me, no matter what mistakes I made, how she'd been patient with me even when I didn't deserve it. That's when it hit me. She wasn't holding me back. I was holding myself back. All this time, I'd been running from my own fear of failure, from my insecurities. Emily had never asked me to change or to be anything I wasn't. She just wanted me to be the best version of myself, and I couldn't see it until after it was too late. I realized I had never really understood what love was. I thought it was about achieving some kind of status or success, about proving something to the world. But true love, real love, is about support, understanding, and growth. It's about building each other up, not tearing each other down. I wanted to call her. I wanted to tell her I'd messed up, but part of me was afraid that I'd already gone too far, that I'd lost my chance. I didn't even know if she still cared. But the thing that weighed on me the most wasn't just the loss of her. It was realizing that I had let my own fears and insecurities cloud something beautiful. A few months passed, and I kept going through the motions of my life. Work, weekends, more work, some nights of solitude. But everything felt a little more hollow. I tried to fill the emptiness with productivity, but I couldn't escape the feeling that I was missing something real. Then, one evening, I ran into Emily at a cafe. It was completely unexpected. I was sitting at a table, buried in some work, when I looked up and saw her standing there, a little hesitantly, as if she wasn't sure whether to approach me or not. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. I hadn't seen her in months, and yet seeing her there felt both surreal and completely natural at the same time. "Hey," she said with a small, warm smile. "I wasn't sure you'd still be coming here." I could feel the weight of those months apart hanging between us, but I managed to smile back. "Yeah, I've been coming here for a while. Never thought I'd run into you." We made small talk at first. Nothing too deep, just catching up. But there was something different about the way she was talking to me now. There was a certain confidence, an ease that I hadn't noticed before. It was clear she'd been through her own journey since we broke up, but it wasn't just the way she carried herself. It was what she said next that caught me off guard. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since we ended things," she said. "I think we both needed some time apart to figure out what we really wanted." I nodded, trying to hide the ache in my chest. But she wasn't done. She looked at me, her eyes steady and calm. "You know," she continued, "I didn't want to tell you at the time, but I actually started my own business a few months before we broke up. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want you to feel like I was pushing you or that I was ahead of you in some way." Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. All this time, I had thought I was the one pushing for success, for change. I'd thought Emily was the one holding me back, but here she was. She'd been quietly building her own dreams, succeeding in ways I hadn't even known about. "I didn't want to make you feel like I was ahead of you," she repeated, almost as if reading my mind. "I didn't want you to think you weren't enough, but I've been doing really well. And I guess I just wanted to let you know, because you were always telling me you wanted to do bigger things, and I think you can. You just have to believe it for yourself." In that moment, everything clicked. The weight of all the doubts, all the insecurities that had clouded my judgment, started to lift. I had spent so much time thinking that Emily was holding me back, when in reality, it was my own fears and doubts that had been the true obstacle. She had been quietly living her own dreams, succeeding, and still believed in me, even when I couldn't believe in myself. I felt a mix of awe, regret, and gratitude all at once. She wasn't the reason I wasn't succeeding. I was. I had let my own insecurities get in the way of seeing what was right in front of me, the incredible woman I had been lucky enough to love, and who, despite everything, still cared enough to talk to me now. After that conversation with Emily, everything felt different. I couldn't stop thinking about what she had said. The truth hit me harder than I was ready for. I had been the one holding myself back. I had blamed her, convinced myself that our relationship was the problem. But the truth was, she had been living her own dreams quietly, not needing anyone's approval, not needing to prove herself to me or anyone else. And I had been so caught up in my own insecurities that I couldn't see that. The reality was that I had been running away from the wrong things, my own fears, my own doubts. I had believed that love and success were this constant race, that I had to be the best, the most accomplished, the most impressive person in the room. I thought I had to prove something to the world, to her, to myself. But love, real love, wasn't about competition or proving anything. It was about mutual support, about encouraging each other to grow and become the best versions of ourselves together. I had never understood that until now. I spent the next few days in a bit of a daze, reflecting on all the times I had taken Emily for granted, all the moments I had brushed off because I was too wrapped up in my own insecurities. I thought about how she had always been there for me, even when I couldn't see the value in what we had. She had never once made me feel inadequate, even when I was at my lowest. She didn't try to push me, didn't try to make me feel like I needed to be someone I wasn't. I had been the one pushing her away, sabotaging the best thing I had in my life because of my own fears. And now, sitting here, thinking about everything that had happened, I felt a deep regret. But more than regret, I felt this sense of clarity. I had learned something about myself that I hadn't expected to learn until much later in life. I learned that love isn't about competing or comparing yourself to others. It's about lifting each other up, supporting each other's dreams, and growing together, not apart. Emily hadn't been holding me back. I had been holding myself back. And in doing so, I had pushed away the one person who truly understood me. A few weeks passed after that unexpected meeting with Emily, and it was like everything had shifted. The weight of the mistakes I had made was still there, but now, instead of feeling like I had missed my chance with her, I felt like I had learned something invaluable about myself. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't too late for me to change, to be better. Not just for Emily, but for myself. I knew I couldn't undo the past, but I could take responsibility for the way I had acted. I realized that love isn't about finding someone who completes you or who is somehow going to fix your life. It's about finding someone who encourages you to be better, who challenges you to face your fears and push through the things that hold you back. Emily had done that for me, whether I was able to recognize it at the time or not. I spent some time working on myself after that, focusing on my career, yes, but also learning how to be more present, more self-aware. I knew now that my happiness didn't depend on being the most successful or the most accomplished person in the room. It depended on being true to myself and my own values. And part of that meant knowing how to value the people around me, especially the ones who had been there when I didn't deserve it. Eventually, Emily and I did speak again. It wasn't anything romantic at first, but we had the kind of conversation that I had needed to have with her all along. We talked openly, honestly, about what went wrong, what we had learned, and what we wanted from our lives going forward. And in that moment, I realized that there was no competition, no measuring of who had done more, who had achieved more. What mattered was the respect and understanding we had for each other. It wasn't about comparing success. It was about supporting each other's journeys. It wasn't long after that we found ourselves reconnecting, not just as lovers, but as two people who had grown. I no longer saw Emily as someone to measure myself against, and she didn't see me as someone who needed fixing. We were just two people, both trying to navigate our lives, both pushing forward in our own ways, but now supporting each other fully. And for the first time, I felt like I could finally breathe. The moral of all of this? Real love isn't about competition or proving your worth. It's about being vulnerable, being honest with yourself, and giving space to the person you love to grow, without fear of being left behind. It's about believing in each other's dreams, even when you're not sure how your own will unfold. Because ultimately, love isn't about achieving success alone. It's about building something meaningful together. And for the first time in my life, I understood that. I had learned to stop running from my fears, and instead, I learned to embrace the kind of love that doesn't hold you back, but helps you grow.